Hello. I recently saw a video by Neal Fox, who actually kind of posed a couple of observations and questions, more or less, that I wanted to answer and kind of clear up any misunderstandings. The video was actually very well thought out, and I appreciate being able to see things like that when there's a point and a reference. So one of the things that stuck out to me was what Luciferianism is for, and I'd like to define that in a very kind of clear and simple way. First is individualism and self-evolution. So individualism essentially with the responsibility of self-evolution and the ability when it comes to others to assist those who show the potential or the desire and the possibility, the reality to evolve. And that's where the assist thing comes in with, outside the self. The selfish desire to really see your ability to empower others is a benefit not only to the self but to the other person, and that's considered what I consider noble. I do not pity the weak, like in nature. If they hold the slave mentality, which I'm going to get to, then that's a destiny we can't really interrupt. The second thing is instincts and drives are infallible. The one thing, and here's where the daemon comes in, daemon is, in my kind of theory and my work, what I've come to perceive it as through research and experience, is the raw instinct, the unbridled emotion blended with reason and discipline. That is connecting with your daemon. When you've made that connection, you invariably create that link between the conscious and unconscious. The raw drives with the conscious awareness, blending those to kind of shape your life. So you're using your raw emotions, your lusts, your desires as your springboard, if you will, your fuel, to then shape them towards a meaningful way within the society we live in. What we have to understand is we live in a society that is dominated by the slave mentality. And what I mean by that is, as Neal Fox referenced, is the Old Testament was written by people that were oppressed. But this is where the Luciferian Predator Ideology comes into play. Now, as the Old Testament shaped, of course, the Christian perception of the world, along with the New Testament, that mentality overtook the Roman Empire. It became this kind of subservient, everybody needs to be good and help the poor and all this, all the while doing the exact opposite. The slave mentality is that we have to survive in a way that has someone dominating us. Okay, now what the Jews were really good at was adapting to their oppressors, because they had many. But in different points in history, the Jews have risen up to have the predator mentality in a active defense kind of strategy. So in that way, I praise Israel for what they've done in modern times. None of their neighbors have been able to take them down, and they're probably through whatever it is, whether it's American assistance, whoever, these guys, as a small little country that's at odds with everyone, is able to really conquer their enemies if they mess with them. That's something that's impressive, no matter what. Now, throughout history, we see that the predator spirit is dominant. And why I'm calling for that, why I'm referring to that as a good thing, is that in all of those cultures, other than the Hebrew, the Jewish, essentially, and Christian culture, the strong, the heroes. We would praise the strong and the proud for their accomplishments and what they did. It was good to conquer your enemies, your obstacles, whatever it is. It was good to strive for the evolution to become better and to overmaster that which threatens you. That's what we see in the Macedonians. That's what we see in the Persians to an extent. That's what we see in the Assyrians to some extent. And Sumerians as well. The Akkadians, Sargon the Great, and some of their stelae that we've been able to decipher have praised the leader quality. And if you look at also like the Moabs with the god Chemosh, who's going to appear in a grimoire that I'm working on, strive to conquer and essentially devour their enemies. It's symbolic, but it's also very important. If we had that mentality in this world now, within a balanced sense, when you think about the daemon, then you probably wouldn't have so many casualties in some of the wars that we have fought in recent times. If you're going to go to war with a country, then you need to annex them and make them a part of our culture by moving ours in and assimilating and creating that bridge where people can relate to each other. Because when you don't have the relation to each other, or the where are they coming from factor involved, then that creates, people that want to hurt other people for xenophobic reasons, more or less. So I'm calling for a culture that's that praises the strong and accomplishments, not those and the have-nots. So the Old Testament perception of the world to me is not only disgusting but alien, because as how I grew up, I had to overcome obstacles in a lot of different ways, just as many people do every day. And I see that as a good quality because it brought me to where I am today. So going with that concept, conflict and struggle make us stronger. And I don't mean when I praise a war god, it's not praising literal war or wanting to go do that. It's about conflict and struggling to overcome my obstacles or my enemies by the way of thought, by the way of any means possible. So when I say within a legal way, you have to operate within the slave morality of our society until that changes. So you have to operate within legal bounds, because going to prison obviously is not a goal of most people. Judeo-Christian values and the religion are poison. And I say blind faith and sickness of spirit stems from the belief in duality. Duality does not exist within nature. And what I mean by that is the serpent that devours its prey in the wild is not thinking of acting in a perceived satanic or destructive nature. It's surviving. Same with the lions, same with beasts of prey. They don't act to inflict pain and harm on others, they act to survive. And when we establish that we have that within us, it's our thing to survive, then we can exercise a better kind of balanced perception within the world of, maybe that's not a good idea to do that to someone else, because, it's going to create this effect. We have to keep that in perception. So where the daemon comes in is the reason and the discipline to control that. Or in anger, not striking someone when it's not the appropriate time to do so is very important. Obviously for yourself, first and foremost, from staying out of jail. So war gods and the symbolism of like the Assyrians and that culture is the best in each culture at the height of when they were conquering. And that's symbolic of the continual struggle over the obstacles in life. So when I say bring back the Assyrian gods, it's just not the Assyrian gods. It's, as you'll see in a new grimoire that I'm working through, Dragon of the Two Flames, that it's about the individual deities, deific masks as I call them, being the best of the potential of people. That's what the daemon is. It's also the drive, but also our continual strive for self-excellence. It's not an end. It's not a utopia. It's a continual strive for greatness. It's like how the ancient Greeks would look at a ruler's statue and say, and that would symbolize that's the best, the conquering, the most viable aspect in our society. That's who we strive for, a living God or a deified king. We take that and put it to the individual. So I have images of my daemon. I want to become more excellent in these ways. That's what the daemon represents in an outer perception. Not just, oh, this is my vision, you need to understand it. It's not that. It's looking to something and finding the great potential of it. So ego is meaningful in observation of the daemon. The ego is like Neal Fox mentioned, is one aspect of the brain, a small part. So we have to explore the unconscious in those worlds, and the world that we perceive around us is what takes into our subconscious in some level. So we have to be able to explore our inner selves, and that's where the daemon comes in. And then one thing I want to point out is the elite may be of any race or gender. And that's important because some people have asked me, do you support fascism or National Socialism, Nazi, etc.? And Luciferians could never be Nazis or National Socialists because we don't believe in socialism. Socialism is the collective everyone and putting that above the self-interest. Well, the conquering or ascending spirit of the adversarial fire, the black flame, consciousness, has illuminated in nearly every culture and tribe throughout the ancient Near East and the Western world. And, of course, there are factors like location, diet, geography, and the culture and the conditions they live in to what they excel in. There are, at different times, these people always excel in some ways. Look at the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Canaanites, the Egyptians, the Hittites, Hurrians, Moabs, the Macedonians, the Persians. All have ascended to conquer their enemies at one time or another and excel in art and in greatness in almost every fashion. Then at other times they fall and are conquered. Luciferianism calls to the individual and says, take what is great or your potential, what you see, and strive for it. That's where that comes into play. And when you perceive the principles of the predator, and that's where that comes in, is that if we don't overmaster, if we don't conquer our obstacle, it will conquer us. So the Luciferian invariably says, then this is romanticized in a way, and this is good. But we need to perceive it in a balanced way, that our society continues, that we are able to bring out the great things of the individual and not praise the fallible loser traits that we see in the slave mentality, which is echoed in Hollywood, which is echoed in modern media when we praise the drug addictions of movie stars or reality TV shows. It's about conquering. A Luciferian would praise the UFC fighter who defeats his enemy, or the scientist who discovers a new potential for our future. That's where the greatness comes in. So I plan to have more videos like this going over some fine points, and I would like to again thank Neal Fox for his interesting video.